The rhythm remained constant, unwavering, a woman's voice, breathless and desperate, moaning his name like a prayer. The repeated sound of a headboard striking the wall echoed in flawed but steady timing. I used to listen with curiosity, wondering what it would feel like, questioning what he did to them. Now, I no longer had to speculate, because last night I was one of them, and if I wanted, I could be again. All it would take was a simple knock. Before we continue, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. It's quick, effortless, and supports the channel in ways you wouldn't believe. I truly appreciate it. Now, let's begin. It started with a murmur, low, steady, self-assured, followed by a woman's response, soft and breathless. Though the words were indistinct, the anticipation in her tone was unmistakable. Then came the first moan, sharp, breaking, completely uninhibited. The headboard struck the wall, slow at first, then gaining speed, its imperfect rhythm in sync with her gasps. There was no hesitation, no awkwardness, just pure, overwhelming pleasure. I lay frozen, my breath shallow, warmth curling through me. This wasn't normal. I had overheard neighbors before, brief, forgettable moments. But this was different. And it happened every night. Different voices, different women, but the same desperate, uncontrolled sounds. I rolled onto my side, pressing my thighs together, my pulse erratic. I should have drowned it out, but I didn't. I listened. And with every gasp slipping through the thin walls, one thought burned hotter in my mind. What was he doing to them? And why did I suddenly wish it were me? By day, he was unremarkable, quiet, self-contained, never drawing attention. But at night, when the walls pulsed with pleasure, he became something else entirely. I had only caught glimpses of him, a tall, broad-shouldered man, effortlessly composed, likely in his mid-50s. He carried an authority younger men lacked. Women never stayed long, but they always left looking transformed. I tried not to stare when our paths crossed, yet I noticed everything: the way he moved, unhurried and assured, the way he spoke, low and deliberate, as if every word held weight. Most of all, the way he looked at people like he already knew their secrets. I told myself I wasn't fixated, but I was. Then one night, I turned a corner and nearly collided with him. Up close, he smelled clean, warm, expensive. He didn't step back, only held my gaze, a smirk teasing at his lips. Thin walls, my breath caught. He knew. His smirk lingered, but he didn't wait for a reaction. He just walked past me, his steps slow, deliberate. I remained frozen, fingers tightening around my keys, pulse hammering in my throat. Thin walls. 2 words, yet they unraveled everything. He had known for some time. I forced myself to exhale, pretending it didn't affect me, pretending I wasn't burning with embarrassment and something else entirely. But as I turned to unlock my door, I saw it, a glance over his shoulder, a knowing smirk, like he was waiting for me to say something. I didn't. I locked myself inside, pressing my back against the door, heart racing. It was one thing to listen, another to be caught. But now ignoring him was impossible. The following night, The sounds started again, but they felt different now, louder, sharper. Or maybe I was just listening more intently. The woman's moans sliced through the silence, breathless, desperate, almost wrecked. The steady rhythm against the wall remained relentless. I squeezed my thighs together, my breath shallow, heat pooling low in my stomach. Had he always been this intense, or was this meant for me? I turned, pressing my palm lightly to the wall, my body burning, restless. I imagined him on the other side, his body moving against hers, his voice low, commanding, saying things I couldn't quite make out. My hand drifted lower before I could stop myself. My legs parted, breath hitching as my fingers traced slow circles, mirroring the rhythm beyond the wall. It was easy to pretend, easy to imagine that it was me, that his hands were on me, his voice whispering in my ear. The woman cried out, her voice sharp, fractured. I muffled my own moan against my wrist. The heat built fast, the pressure unbearable, my body clenching, pleasure crashing through me in waves. I bit my lip, shuddering, breathless, my pulse pounding in my ears. And yet, even as my body relaxed, the ache inside me refused to fade. I was done waiting. I needed to know. Tomorrow, I would make my move. All day, anticipation thrummed beneath my skin. I wasn't anxious, I was ready. Every time I heard a door shut or footsteps in the hallway, I wondered if it was him. Was he thinking of me the way I had been thinking of him? Was he waiting for me to make a move? Or did he already know I would? By the time night fell, my pulse was steady, my decision made. I stepped out just as he did, as if fate had aligned this moment for us. He paused, his gaze settling on me with amusement. Twice in 2 days, he mused. Are you sure you're not following me? I let my lips curve into something playful. Would that bother you? His smirk deepened. Depends on your intentions. I tilted my head slightly, locking eyes with him. I had been considering the fact that since we were neighbors, it might be a good idea to have dinner together sometime, to properly acquaint ourselves. A brief silence followed, not out of reluctance, but something more calculated. He was assessing me, weighing my words, deciding whether I fully grasped what I was truly asking. Then, a slight nod. Tomorrow, my place. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a statement. A flicker of heat shot through me, curling deep in my stomach. Sounds perfect. I pivoted first, walking away without glancing back. But I didn't have to. I could feel his gaze tracking me the entire way. When tomorrow arrived, his door was already ajar as I approached. Not fully open, just enough to signal that he had been expecting me. He stood in the doorway, leaning casually against the frame, his usual unreadable smirk in place, as though he knew exactly why I was there, as if he had always known. Right on time, he remarked, stepping aside to let me in. His apartment was exactly as I had anticipated, sleek, minimal, deliberately arranged. No unnecessary clutter, no distractions. Like a man who permitted nothing into his world unless he intended it to be there. The air carried the rich scent of something well-prepared steak, perhaps. A man who ensured a woman was fed before he devoured her. You cook, I teased as I moved past him. I like control over what I consume. His voice was smooth, deliberate. Don't you? My pulse quickened, but I concealed the reaction, at least for now. I took a seat at the small dining table, crossing my legs with deliberate ease, watching as he poured the wine. Every movement was slow, precise, completely in command of the moment. So, tell me, he said, setting a glass in front of me, are you always this interested in your neighbors? I let my fingers drift along the rim of my glass, tilting my head slightly. Only the ones worth being interested in. His lips twitched in amusement. And what exactly caught your attention? Lifting my glass, I took a slow sip, holding his gaze over the rim. The way you make women sound. For the first time, he hesitated, just for a fleeting second. His eyes darkened, that smirk sharpening into something far more dangerous. And how do I make them sound? Ruined, wrecked, completely undone. I didn't voice any of those words aloud. I simply smiled. Interesting, he murmured, letting out a quiet chuckle as he swirled his wine. Good to know my reputation precedes me. I hummed, taking another sip, hard not to notice. There was no idle chatter after that. There was no need for it. The air between us was already dense with something else. He ate methodically, his gaze flicking toward me between bites, as though gauging how long I could endure the tension. I met his stare head on, making him wait, forcing him to work for it. But the moment I drained the last drop of wine and set my glass down, he rose to his feet. Come here. 2 words, not a question, a directive. Heat surged through me as I stood, my pulse hammering. He took my hand, leading me toward the bedroom. I didn't hesitate. I didn't want to. The room was dimly lit, his scent still clinging to the air. Everything about the space was controlled, deliberate, just like him. He shut the door behind us with an almost lazy motion, but nothing about the way he looked at me was idle. He knew exactly what was about to unfold. I barely had time to process the intensity in his gaze before he moved. One moment, I stood still, anticipation thrumming in my veins. The next, his hands were on me, firm, steady, decisive. He guided me backward, his grip a silent instruction. His touch was confident but unrushed. He wasn't merely leading me, he was claiming me. When the backs of my knees met the edge of the bed, he didn't push. He simply stood there, watching, waiting for me to determine how this would proceed. I sat down first. That was all the permission he required. His lips met mine instantly, not tentative, not exploratory, possessive. The kiss was deep, slow, methodical, as if unraveling me, piece by piece. He wasn't hurried. He wanted me to feel every second of it, to understand without words that he was in control. His hands slid lower, gripping my hips as he guided me onto my back, his weight pressing down, grounding me. My body was already alight, already restless, but he wasn't rushing. He wanted me to squirm for it. His lips left a heated trail down my neck, his stubble scraping against my skin. Every kiss, every brush of his mouth was precise, like he was committing me to memory, learning exactly where to linger, precisely how to dismantle me. Then, effortlessly, he flipped me. One moment, I was beneath him. The next, I was on my stomach, his hands gripping my hips, adjusting me just enough to arch my back. "Stay there," he murmured, his voice laced with quiet command. Heat surged through me, my breath catching as his hands glided down my spine, slow and teasing. He wasn't simply touching me, he was directing my every movement. His grip was firm yet patient, positioning me with an expertise that made my head spin. And when he finally moved against me, the first stroke stole the breath from my lungs. His grasp tightened, fingers pressing into my waist as he set the rhythm, slow at first, torturously slow, until my nails curled into the sheets. Just when I thought I could adapt, he switched things up. He altered his grip, his angle, the way he dictated my movements. And suddenly, it wasn't just incredible, it was earth-shattering. Every shift plunged me deeper into sensation, his control absolute, like he instinctively knew the perfect moment to slow down, when to push harder, and exactly when to make me beg for more. A moan escaped me before I could stop it. "That's it," he murmured, his voice rough with satisfaction. "Let me hear you." Then he moved again, just a slight shift, a subtle change in depth, and my body came undone. A sharp gasp tore from me as my fingers clutched at the sheets, my back arching as waves of pleasure ripped through me, not soft, not gentle, but intense and unforgiving. He felt it. He knew the way my body tightened around him, the way my legs trembled, how I clenched down, but he wasn't finished. I barely had time to recover before he flipped me again, parting my thighs effortlessly, like a man determined to wring every last ounce of pleasure from me. This time, he wanted to watch. He hovered above me, his hands locking around my wrists, pinning them beside my head, not restraining, but holding me exactly where he wanted me. His gaze roamed over me, studying every reaction, every breathless sound. Then he moved again, slow and deliberate, utterly in control. My body responded instantly, tightening as the pressure mounted too fast, too intense. His rhythm never broke, his grip never eased. He was relentless, his command over me unshakable, as he pushed me toward another peak. He watched as I unraveled beneath him, and he wasn't stopping until I had nothing left to give. When the second wave crashed over me, it blinded me. My breath shattered, my body tensed, my head tilting back as pleasure consumed me, leaving me trembling beneath him. I had never been touched like this. I had never been taken like this. By the time he reached his own climax, his control finally fractured, just enough for me to feel the raw intensity beneath it. A deep, guttural groan escaped him as his fingers tightened around my wrists, his restraint finally giving way. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The only sound in the room was our ragged breathing, heavy and uneven. His fingers drifted lazily down my arm, slow and deliberate, as if committing the moment to memory. I was still trembling, still overly sensitive, my body utterly spent. I had never been wrecked like this before. And then, finally, he chuckled a low, satisfied sound. "You were curious," he murmured, his lips brushing against my ear. "Was it everything you imagined?" I let out a slow, blissed-out breath, my body exhausted but wholly sated. A small, contented smirk played on my lips. Better. The first time should have been enough. But it wasn't. The next night, I heard it again, the same rhythm, the same broken cries, the same overwhelming pleasure bleeding through the walls. But this time, it didn't leave me restless. It didn't leave me aching with curiosity or frustration, because now I knew I had felt it for myself. I had been one of them, and I could be again whenever I wanted. All it would take was a knock. I lay in bed, his scent still lingering on my sheets, my skin still sensitive from the night before. My body ached not from exhaustion, but from satisfaction, deep, undeniable, complete. And yet, I was already thinking about the next time. I turned onto my side, pressing my palm against the wall. The rhythm next door was steady, unyielding. I could see it in my mind, the way he moved, the way he commanded every moment, how he could ruin a woman and put her back together in the same breath. The woman on the other side gasped, her voice raw, desperate. I smirked. That had been me last night, and tomorrow it could be me again. I didn't have to wonder anymore. I belonged to that world now, and all I had to do was knock. Every man has a secret to keeping a woman coming back. Some call it confidence, some call it skill. But what do you think truly makes the difference? Have you ever experienced a moment that completely changed your perception of yourself? Tonight's story is about the night I ceased being the well-behaved girl and uncovered a part of me I never knew existed. Between the flashing neon signs, the rhythmic music, and three people who turned my world upside down, let's just say my solo act became something far more thrilling. This isn't just any story, it's about breaking boundaries, surrendering to the moment, and realizing that the most unforgettable nights often start with saying yes instead of no. If you're ready to step outside your comfort zone and let your wild side take over, stay tuned, hit that subscribe button, and let's dive into the night that changed everything. The bass wasn't just background noise anymore. It was coursing through me, syncing perfectly with my heartbeat. There I stood, center stage, moving with the same effortless confidence I had countless times before. The lights, pure enchantment, blending pink and gold, casting surreal shadows over the crowd below. And the guys at the tables, their gazes practically burned through me, filled with hungry grins and silent pleas for attention. But up there, I wasn't just myself, I became something else entirely. An untouchable goddess, fierce and liberated, living her best life. But here's the truth that wasn't the real me. Off stage, I was that girl. You know, the type who turns red if someone so much as glances at her the wrong way. The kind who would rather vanish into thin air than make eye contact with a stranger. The reigning queen of the thanks but no thanks club when it came to dating. It wasn't that I had anything against guys, relationships, or any of that. I just didn't trust myself around them. Or maybe they were the ones I couldn't trust. Either way, saying no was my safe zone, my security blanket in a world that felt unpredictable. Girl, you absolutely crushed it tonight. Bella's voice broke through my thoughts as I stepped off stage. She tossed me a water bottle and enveloped me in one of her signature bear hugs, radiating that endless Bella energy that could probably light up an entire city. Thanks, I barely managed to say over the lingering pulse of the music. Bella and I, total opposites. She thrived on attention, laughed like tomorrow didn't exist, and always, without fail, knew exactly what she wanted. Not gonna lie, I envied that sometimes. She nudged me playfully. Don't look now, but there are two absolute snacks at the bar who cannot stop staring at you. I couldn't help myself, I looked. And holy hell, were they something else? One had that undeniable bad boy energy, all sharp angles, and a smirk that screamed trouble. The other, built like a dream, with kind eyes and a quiet confidence that somehow felt even more dangerous. Yeah, no, I said, shaking my head so quickly I probably resembled a bobblehead. Come on, Ava, seriously? Bella threw her hands up. I already talked to them. They're completely normal guys. It's just one night. What's the worst that could happen? My stomach did this weird little flip. The worst that could happen. My mind went down a rabbit hole of ridiculous scenarios that made me cringe. But the fear still gnawed at me, nibbling away at my resolve. I was so done being the girl who always said no. I don't know about this, Bella. I wavered, my voice betraying me. Please. She hit me with the look, her trademark expression, the one I never could refuse. Do it for me. I exhaled, already feeling my default rejection forming. But then I thought about my life. Predictable, dull, incredibly lonely. Maybe Bella was onto something. Maybe it was time to switch things up. Fine, I heard myself say, like someone else had hijacked my mouth. But just this once, the night air felt different as we exited the club, the city a mesmerizing blur of golden and silver streaks, as we climbed into a cab like it was the most natural thing in the world. There I was, squeezed in next to Ethan, aka Mr. Sharp Features, while Bella secured her spot beside his friend. Ethan flashed me a smile that made my pulse stutter those teeth against that tanned skin. Unfair. You're a lot quieter than I expected, he remarked, his tone light but careful. I managed what was probably the most awkward smile ever. Yeah, I'm just kinda new to all this. First time out? I nodded, my face heating up to full tomato mode. But here's the thing he didn't press. Major points for that. Instead, he kept things easygoing, and by the time we reached their place, I actually started to relax. Their apartment? Next level. Straight out of Instagram, sleek, modern, and lined with massive windows that framed an unreal cityscape. Bella and James, that was his name, immediately made themselves at home, cracking open a bottle of wine and setting the mood with music. Meanwhile, I lingered in the background, a full-blown wallflower, watching everyone else thrive, while I was still convincing myself this was real life. You good? Ethan's voice was low, gentle, as he suddenly appeared beside me. Totally, I blurted, way too fast to sound convincing. He just smiled, his gaze steady, reassuring. We only do what you're comfortable with. And you know what? I actually believed him. That's when things got interesting. The wine did its job, easing the tension. But let's be real, my nerves were still buzzing beneath the surface. The whole atmosphere felt surreal, the warmth of the room, the mingling scents of cologne and perfume, the low thrum of music, weaving a world where the usual rules just didn't seem to apply. I couldn't even tell you who made the first move, maybe Ethan, maybe Bella, but the second his lips met mine, my mind completely blanked. His kiss was unhurried, as if silently asking permission, and it sent a shiver straight down my spine. My hands hovered uncertainly over his shoulders because, honestly, where was I even supposed to put them? He instinctively knew exactly how to respond, his touch anchoring me when I felt like I might drift away. Everything suddenly sharpened into high definition, the warmth radiating from him in waves, his breath mingling with mine, the tantalizing scratch of his stubble against my cheek. My heart pounded wildly, partly because, damn, this was intense, but mostly because I'd never experienced anything remotely like this before. Then, Bella's laughter sliced through the moment, that signature sound that always managed to make things feel lighter. Relax, girl, she murmured, her voice sending shivers across my skin. Her hand found mine, fingers interlacing effortlessly, and before my brain could fully register what was happening, she was kissing me too. It was real. Bella's kiss was a completely different experience. While Ethan had been gentle, she was daring and playful, challenging me to step outside my comfort zone. My pulse skyrocketed, my breath hitching as her fingertips traced along my jawline, igniting a trail of electricity that left me completely shaken. Ethan's hold on my waist tightened, grounding me while my knees debated whether they still worked. And you know what? I didn't back away. It was like every nerve in my body had suddenly decided to wake up all at once and throw a party. Bella pulled back with a soft laugh I could feel against my lips, her eyes shimmering with an unspoken knowing. See, she whispered, her thumb grazing my cheek. Natural talent, right here. Her confidence was infectious. When James stepped forward, all careful touches and cautious exploration, I leaned in instinctively. His hands settled on my hips, applying just enough pressure to guide me closer. His kiss was slow and deliberate, like he had all the time in the world. Suddenly, the entire room seemed to spin in the most incredible way, each little sensation a vivid snapshot. Bella's hand resting on my shoulder, James's fingers exploring the small of my back, Ethan's warm breath on my neck as he observed and waited. It was no longer about individual touches. It had become a seamless blend of sensations, each layer folding into the next in an intoxicating symphony of feeling. Ethan's lips brushed against my collarbone, barely touching, yet setting my skin ablaze. James's thumb moved in lazy circles on my waist, sending heat rippling through me, while Bella's fingers tangled in my hair, rewiring my brain with every caress. Her soft laughter kept me tethered, preventing me from completely unraveling. It was pure chaos, the kind you never want to end. Every time I thought I had a grasp on what was happening, like Ethan shifting to my jaw or Bella's fingertips trailing down my arm, something new blindsided me. Bella kissed me again, more assured this time, and I instinctively kissed her back, tasting wine and the essence of the moment. Somewhere in the beautiful whirlwind, James's fingers laced with mine, and I let it happen, intertwining effortlessly. He was this quiet, steady force amid the storm, different from the others, but just as intense. When he leaned in close, murmuring something against my ear that I couldn't even register, the warmth of his voice sent chills cascading through me. Time had completely lost meaning by this point. We were nothing but motion and sound, laughter and whispers melting together. Ethan pulled me in, his hands moving with a certainty that made me feel both protected and untamed all at once. Bella was behind me again, her breath warm against my neck as she murmured teasing little nothings, guiding my hands while she arched back with a smile of pure mischief and satisfaction. Keeping track of anything had become impossible. Everything blurred into an overwhelming wave of sensation. One moment, Ethan was cradling my face with almost reverent gentleness as he kissed me senseless, and the next, Bella was pulling me into her world of playful giggles and uninhibited curiosity, her gaze sparkling with an unmistakable, "I told you so." Then James would step in, his hands resting on my shoulders, working some kind of magic that turned my bones to liquid. His kisses were a stark contrast, steady, grounding, like returning to something familiar and safe in the midst of all this glorious chaos. And I kept leaning into him, craving that anchor amid the storm. Eventually, we collapsed together onto a massive couch, tangled up in a heap, trying to remember how to breathe. Bella stretched out beside me like a contented cat, her head resting on my shoulder as she hummed an unfamiliar tune. Ethan was right there too, his arm lightly grazing mine, while James sat at the edge, head tilted back, wearing a subtle yet telling smile. Then Bella shattered the comfortable silence with her signature grin. "Well," she declared, "that was definitely not your typical Netflix night." I let out a breathless, slightly shaky laugh that still somehow felt completely real. "Definitely not." Ethan turned to me, his gaze soft with concern. "You good?" he asked gently. I nodded, still working to steady my breathing. "Yeah," I whispered, the words barely making it out. "I really am." Bella smirked knowingly, her fingers finding mine again. "Told you, letting go would be worth it." I met her gaze, a smile spreading across my face. one I couldn't have suppressed even if I wanted to. Maybe you have a point, I admitted, still in awe of everything that had just happened. The room fell quiet then, but in the best way. I allowed myself to sink into the warmth surrounding me, not just from exhaustion or lingering touches, but from this incredible realization that for once I had let go of my need to control everything. And instead of breaking apart, I had stumbled into something utterly amazing. What a ride!